Hello, friends, and welcome back to the Creativity, Spirituality, and Making a Buck podcast with David Nichtern on the Be Here Now network. I'm your host and monologist, Michael Kammers, and on behalf of all of us here at Be Here Now and Dharma Moon, we sincerely hope this podcast finds you well, and we are grateful that you're joining us. Here at CSM, our guide David Nichtern discusses how to lead an integrated life involving spiritual practice, creative expression, and right livelihood with guests who embody and manifest these principles in their own lives. And in this episode, we are super fortunate to have Buddhist minister, author, activist, yoga instructor, authorized Lama and Queen, Lama Rod Owens, returning for a second appearance on the pod. We are super grateful that Lama Rod has generously chosen to share his time and wisdom with us, and we are excited to share this conversation with you, revolving around some of the principles in his recently released book, The New Saints, which we emphatically recommend to all of you, our dear listeners. And who is Lama Rod Owens, you may ask? Lama Rod Owens is an author, activist, and authorized Lama, or Buddhist teacher in the Kagyu school of Tibetan Buddhism. He holds a Master of Divinity degree in Buddhist Studies from Harvard Divinity School, where he focused on the intersection of social change, identity, and spiritual practice. He is the author of Love and Rage, The Path of Liberation Through Anger, and a co-author of Radical Dharma, and now the author of The New Saints. His teachings center on freedom, self-expression, and radical self-care. He's a leading voice in a new generation of Buddhist teachers with over 11 years of experience. And Lama Rod is highly respected among his peers and the communities that he serves. If you'd like to learn more and connect with Lama Rod, head over to his website, lamarod.com. Follow him on Instagram, and be sure to sign up for his mailing list to stay informed of his teaching schedule, which includes a weekly online medicine Buddha practice on Monday nights. If his work around the New Saints interests you and you are listening to this pod when it's fresh, he is leading an 8-week online program on the path of becoming a new saint, beginning October 6th, 2024. Also, we encourage everyone to head over to dharmamoon.com, where we always have an incredible mandala of programming available. We run several mindfulness meditation teacher trainings a year, with David as senior teacher, supported by a wonderful staff of assistant teachers and mentors. Our next round starts October 11th, 2024. There's also a great evergreen Foundations of Mindfulness program. It's a 4-part series. It's available for download on our website. Ethan Nichtern is teaching year-long Buddhist studies modules, and the third Sunday of every month, we have a free community meditation session on the Zoom platform. So please, come join us in community and learn how to synchronize mind and body and become less reactive with a mindfulness practice. And also, a huge thanks to the Be Here Now network and everyone involved with the post-production and distribution of this podcast there. We are grateful to be a part of their wonderful podcast family. If you like this pod, we encourage you to head over to BeHereNowNetwork.com, where you can hear podcasts from Sharon Salzberg, Joseph Goldstein, and many more, including the new podcast, The Four Sacred Gifts, hosted by Dr. Anita Sanchez, amplifying Indigenous voices and the wisdom they carry. Okay, that's it for the introduction. Thanks for hanging in. And now, on to episode 54 of the Creativity, Spirituality, and Making a Buck podcast with special guest Lama Rod Owens, David Nichtern, and as you'll see, a very spontaneously invited Michael Kammers, who mostly listens. Thank you, everyone, and enjoy the episode.
Okay, welcome everybody, wherever you are. Hello, young lovers, wherever you are. This is the Creativity, Spirituality, Making a Buck podcast. We have a return guest today, which is Lama Rod Owens. We spoke maybe a year and a half ago, I think, or so. And he's a very special person in my world because he's bridging a number of different aspects of the Dharma. He's a classically trained Kagyu Lama, which has meaning for me. That's my tradition from Rinpoche and Karmapa. So we share the same, ultimate lineage. And also, he is working with a lot of the students at Dharma Moon. He may be more or less aware of that, but you have many friends at Dharma Moon and students who've been taking your courses and so forth. So it's very special to have you back. Thank you so much for returning.
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks for having me back.
Yeah. And I just want to introduce Michael Kammers, who most of you know as the podcast producer for our CSM podcast. And I just had this intuition. He just got off retreat with Lama Rod, and he's a very big fan and supporter. And he's a very bright guy, and you hear him on the beginning and end of our podcasts. And I had it in my mind, I just want to invite Michael in to participate as he's comfortable doing. So, Michael, thank you for joining us for this part.
Yeah, thank you for the invitation, David. This is spontaneous for all the listeners. I wasn't expecting to be here, and I am very honored to be here with both of you. You are both important teachers to me, even though I have more of a direct relationship with David. So I'm humbled and excited.
Beautiful. Well said. So, Lama, sir, I have been working my way through the New Saints, which is your new-ish book. It's been out for a while, but not that long. And so there are so many different aspects of what you're working with there that it almost is daunting to think about what to focus in on. Yeah. But I did have a section that loomed out at me, and I wanted to see if you're comfortable talking about it. And if not, it's fine. We'll jump onto something else. Yeah. And it was this section about the 7 sorrows of the new saint.
Yeah.
That rang my bell because, there's a lot of idealized versions of meditation out there these days. And, it's easy and your blood pressure goes down and you look cuter and, all the rest of it. But in this section, you seem to be highlighting some serious considerations or potential obstacles that might come up on the path of becoming a teacher and becoming a spiritual guide for people. So is that a good zone to get into?
Oh, absolutely. Yeah.
Cool. Okay. So what I thought is maybe I'll read a little bit of what you said and then ask you to, really go deeper into it with us.
Okay.
So this is from Lama Rod Owens' new book called New Saints, which I highly recommend if you're trying to keep up with the cutting edge of the Dharma in the West. I think it really has a lot to offer that way. The 7 sorrows of the new saint. This section really jumped out. When I first started studying Bodhisattva literature as an early practitioner, I was deeply moved by the Bodhisattva vow not to leave any being behind, and how they commit to ushering all beings through the door of enlightenment before they themselves enter. At the same time, the tradition explained that beings were numberless, and that as long as one being was not free, there would be a carceral state, which is a phrase you use quite a bit, even if it existed for one being only. Even the Buddha is said to have entered nirvana, returning to the great consciousness or essence without having freed all beings. It's interesting, right? Did he violate his bodhisattva vow? Yes. Wow. Okay.
Well, it's complex, but we'll get into it.
Okay. Yeah. That is interesting. Again, the sorrow of the new saint is the experience of realizing that the work of self and collective liberation is driven by uncomfortable, confusing contradictions that we must embody. The new saint metabolizes the grief of dealing with these contradictions and realizes that liberation is complex. These contradictions must be tended to by mourning them and offering the discomfort space while experiencing and releasing the sadness. This grief is what I call the sorrow of the new saint. There are 7 great sorrows of the new saint. I'm going to just quickly read them, and I'd like to visit each one of them, if you don't mind. 1, we will leave people behind, just like that's what you're saying the Buddha did. 2, much of our labor will go unseen. 3, we will be misunderstood. 4, we'll have to figure out what we need. 5, we will disappoint people. 6, we will always embody the potential for violence. And 7, we will make mistakes. these are the contradictions we must tend to in order to do the work of navigating the illogic of liberation
Mhm.
and actually getting ourselves and others free.
Mhm.
Okay.
Mm.
That's like that's like putting a caramel in your mouth and thinking you're going to chew it quickly, you know. Okay, so let's start with number one.
Okay.
We'll leave people behind,
Yeah.
even though the vow says don't.
Yeah. Well, the whole project of the New Saints was actually to delve into the frustration of paradox, of contradictions, right? I think one of the things that deepens our suffering is our attempt to make everything make sense. And I think that's how we get trapped in this. This is how we get trapped in delusion, trying to make it make sense, when instead we're trying to transcend it. Right. And so when we are faced with the dilemma of trying to work out a paradox, we're not actually being called to necessarily work that paradox out, but actually to offer that paradox space so that we develop clarity to understand that, like, there's maybe a different choice than this paradox is actually revealing. Right. So even just getting back into, like, the tradition of the Bodhisattva, which is what the New Saint, work is based on. One of the earliest kinds of teachings, or I would say experiences with the Bodhisattva vow, was like being told by the Rinpoches that, like, you will actually not free every being. And then I would say, then why are we saying this prayer every 5 minutes?
Every 5 minutes.
It was the first time, and this was early in my training. This was the first time where I began to understand, oh, this is actually really, really complex. Like, I've been engaging with the surface of this. Now I have to dive into these hidden meanings. And that's where the bulk of my practice has been for years. Right. So when we talk about, okay, the Bodhisattva isn't supposed to leave beings behind, you have to kind of back and say, okay, no one being is going to free countless beings, right? And so, therefore, I think the Bodhisattva vow is really about us being propelled into the intensity of this work so that we forget that there is an end to this, that we become the work.
Mm-hmm.
And as we become the work, we are actually becoming free, getting enlightened, awakening deep compassion and deep wisdom, right? But you have to forget that there's a goal and just do the work, right? And for me, that's sinking into the depth and the complexity of the teaching you become, because this is an experiential tradition, not a logical or intellectual tradition. This is about experiencing, experience being the root of clarity, right? And it's only through the door of experience do we get free. You just can't read the Bodhisattva vow and say, okay, I got it. No, you have to start living it.
Yeah.
Right. And then as you live it, the wisdom starts to emerge. And that wisdom says, oh, I'm not going to free all beings, but I'm going to free the beings that I am karmically connected to, the beings that I would say I'm responsible for. Like, I do my part, and then it's over. And then I have to rely on other bodhisattvas to come in to do their part. Right? The Buddha established a pyramid scheme, right? But it's not just the Buddha. It's been many, spiritual traditions outside of Buddhism, right? But the Buddha started a particular stream, a pyramid scheme, and that's been going for centuries and centuries, millennia, right? And so now the work is passed to me, and I'm doing my work, and I'm doing my part, and my work will end. And that creates space for others to come along and continue doing this work, right? Until all beings are eventually freed, right?
What about the continuity of consciousness? Like, do you have any, sense of beyond just this particular lifetime and so forth that obviously Buddhists talk about quite a bit?
Yeah.
Is that part of your way of thinking about
Absolutely.
reality?
Yeah. It's like you're training the mind stream to enter into this particular aspiration. It's a focus. And life after life, that focus gets clearer and clearer as long as we come back to that aspiration and train in that life, and train in that aspiration within that life, right? So the Bodhisattva, life after life, is gradually awakening more and more and more until they have this intense and really profound and beautiful agency, that they can actually be in this world, in samsara, or what I call the carceral state, and actually have a sense of who they are, what they are, and what their work is. Right. And that's what makes the Bodhisattva so important. It's like, I often talk about the Matrix.
The Matrix?
Right. The Matrix in my work.
Sure.
Where like these beings outside of the Matrix, these people who live in Zion, have this incredible capacity to actually get downloaded into the Matrix, where they're actually getting people free and waking them up so they can become bodhisattvas. And that's exactly what we're doing as bodhisattvas. We're like emanating into this world, right, with deep support from this awareness of consciousness, this awareness of who and what we are. We use that to ground ourselves so we actually don't get trapped in the Matrix, in the samsara. And we can go along figuring out who's ready to do the work, who's ready to get free, and then finding those folks and supporting them. And I think that's exactly what the Bodhisattva is doing, But it takes time for us to wake up in this experience. Right. And it's often because of the intervention of another being who's much more aware, coming in and triggering that awakening process.
Are you conscious of like intentionally triggering, as you just said it, students, friends, into a more wakeful state? Do you actively, is it a button it pushes, an activation process? Do you have to push yourself to push the button?
It's a process of being.
A way of being?
A way of being is like becoming the sun. Right? The sun just shines. It's not, the sun is in the galaxy, and the sun is like, oh, I'm shining on Rod right now. I'm shining on David. The sun is just shining indiscriminately because that's what they are. That's what the sun does. It radiates. It's a biochemical process that illuminates, right? So when the more awakened the bodhisattva becomes, the more naturally the bodhisattva just radiates clarity into space.
Without an extra intention.
Without necessarily like saying, I am going to awaken someone, but just being.
Right.
But when the bodhisattva says, okay, this is who I'm going to focus on, this is what I'm going to focus on, and they're able to channel that energy, channel the energy of awareness, of the energy of care, wisdom, clarity into particular, situations and into the experience of particular people. Right.
Yeah. Michael, jump in if you like, okay? Yeah.
I appreciate the notion of support on the Bodhisattva path as a sort of like deeper connection with Sangha and community, and as also kind of an antidote to the rugged individualism that is kind of doesn't acknowledge interdependence that's so rampant in our culture. And also how in your work, Lama Rod, you share ways for us to connect with support in the form and formless worlds, which I think is a bit unique in American Buddhism, at least how it's outer facing.
Yeah. Yeah. As you explore new saints, I'm not just talking about Buddhism too, which was incredibly important because there were so many things in Buddhism that initially I felt, oh, Buddhists invented these things, particularly in Tibetan Buddhism, which is an indigenous shamanic tradition. Well, indigenous shamanic traditions are worldwide in every culture, all lands, right? And so when I started practicing and exploring other indigenous shamanic traditions and actually getting initiated into these traditions, I went, oh, okay, this is what I was being taught in Tibetan Buddhism. And so therefore I have another language, another set of words and concepts that I can talk about, and talk about these themes, these ideas in Buddhism, and just open it up even more and make it actually much more accessible for even more people, even outside of Buddhism. So I can go to different traditions and have that kind of inter-religious, inter-spiritual kind of dialogue where I'm like, okay, this is how you talk about this phenomena, and this is how I can talk about this phenomena, and we're talking about the same phenomena, So yeah, I mean, that's really important. Even just going back, right, to like the contradictions, right? This is just something that I don't think is emphasized, that like I think the teachings are just one contradiction after the other, and I think that we have to really go in and hold space for this, or else it becomes a deep disappointment. And that never happened to me. When the Rinpoches were like, no, you're not gonna free every being. That's not possible. I was like, oh, okay. Then like what's the real teaching then? And the real teaching only came with just like many years of just like meditation, sitting, reflection, dialogue, and getting clear about the enormity of the phenomenal world, and also the enormity of like the energetic world, the world outside of this form physical realm that we're currently arising in, right? And then that expansion really, really deeply inspired me. So when I was going through the seven sorrows, yeah, I've really worked through these, and these seven sorrows was just very personal. Like I wasn't intending to have this very general, kind of like exploration, but it was more about this is what I have dealt with in my practice. And I offer it in the book to say, maybe this has been some of your experience, or maybe not. But these are the dilemmas that I had to work through in order to work through the hopelessness or like the grief that would arise. I had to get real about the enormity and the complexity of this and get spacious around it.
And what's great about it is it de-idealizes these notions for other people.
Yeah.
So if I could read the "We Leave People Behind," this is filtered through the lens of your actual experience.
Yeah.
We will not get everyone free because not all of us are ready to be free. That's a powerful statement. When someone isn't ready to be free, forcing them to do the labor of awakening becomes an act of violence.
Yeah.
I wonder if that's, anyhow, the woke thing. We can neither drag people to freedom nor scare them, manipulate them, intimidate them, or use one of our favorite collective techniques, yell at them on social media to get them to freedom.
Yeah.
No kidding. We are not Mother Harriet using our rifle to keep people in check as we journey to freedom. Training in awakened care is training in love, compassion, and joy, which helps us to get clear about what it takes to get people free. We can't do work for others. Each of us must choose liberation on our own terms, and in doing so, commit to our individual labor. So I think this is after the fact. You've sort of described this already, and this is kind of encapsulating it. You can't do the work for others. Why do we even want to do the work for others?
Well, for many reasons. I think first, we're not even often aware that we're doing other people's work.
Okay.
Right. And that's called enabling. If to put that into another language, like we're enabling a lot of people right now. And I think that happens because we've been conditioned to enable or to do other people's work. Or we believe that if we can just do other people's work, that will actually validate us, that would help them to feel good about us. Right? So it's a kind of caretaking with no wisdom.
Is it the
Right?
idiot compassion paradigm?
I would say so, yeah. That kind of compassion that is without wisdom, right? And and so we have to get clear about what our work is and how to support others in their work, because if not, we may end up realizing that we've gone through a whole life actually not having done the real care, intending to our own experience. And I've seen enough people at the end of their life to really understand that. That as you're beginning to transition, you're like, oh my God, I don't know who I am. Like and those are just devastating questions when you're trying to let go of this life. So this is my emphasis on our work that actually lends itself to collective work as well. Like, yeah, there has to be some individual focus. And I know people get, kind of like tense about that, particularly if you grew up in like maybe an ethnocentric culture. And I was having these conversations as I was writing this, people would come and, friends from other countries and cultures would be like, oh, Rod, you're still an American. You're still so individually focused. And I'm like, but like, you're not going to get me free though. Like, you're not going to take my pain away, right? You're not going to die for me. You're not grieving my grief on my behalf. I just always needed to emphasize that, like, yes, I am a part of community. I belong to people. I belong to groups. We are collective social beings. But we have to get clear that there are things that we have to do for ourselves that we can only do for ourselves, like die. like dying isn't a group process. Regardless, if you die in a group, you're still moving through that experience on your own. However, with the support of countless beings. And that's what community is. It supports, right?
And I mean, that's literally Sangha, right? That you're talking about in that sense.
Yeah.
It's not just community, it's Sangha practitioners somewhat sharing that part of the journey.
Yeah, that part of the journey, as long as we're on the same page and moving towards the same goal, yes, that becomes sacred community.
You know what they call me when I play guitar with Krishna Das?
What's that?
The Walla from another Mala. Yeah. So that's a whole nother discussion about how these communities can interact and how much of that do we have to go, oh yeah, okay, we all mean the same thing, and maybe we don't.
Yeah.
So the theistic piece of that, and then that's something. I call KD a theist, and he calls me a nihilist. Because those are. I'm not sure everybody means the same thing in the different communities. Yeah, that's a really. In any case, next one is much of our labor will go unseen. Ouch! Oh God.
Yeah.
Not good for show business. Okay, when we think of the spiritual saint, we tend to think of people who are super famous, who sparked and led massive freedom movements that helped millions of people get access to resources they needed. People like Gandhi, Mother Teresa, or Dr. King. However, an overwhelming majority of people who are committed to this labor will not be known or celebrated. This being, makes me think of parents, this being figured out what their work was, work that may look very different from the work we are called to do.
Yeah.
I say much of our labor will go unseen because often people around us may not consider our labor important or even labor at all. For example, one powerful expression of labor is prayer. Prayer is imperative in liberation work, but not so public or tangible. We are being helped by countless beings at this very moment. That's very poignant.
Yeah.
If you really take a minute.
Yeah.
And we may never be able to understand their labor, just as we are helping others around us without them understanding. Whoa. I do not expect applause or a parade. taken right out of the Lojong slogans, right?
Yep.
Don't expect applause.
Yep.
My only expectation is to do the work of liberation for myself and others. That sounds lonely.
Oh, absolutely. That's the, of course I talk about spiritual loneliness, right? In the book, but yeah, like we have to understand what the real goal, aspiration, intention is. Like, am I helping to get known, to be validated, or am I helping because my deepest aspiration is for everyone to be free of suffering? Right. And so you have to figure out which one of those goals, those aspirations is going to win. Right. And if you're doing things just to be noticed, I'm not saying that like it's not nice to be and wonderful to be, appreciated and seen and, absolutely. I don't, I don't, I don't survive off of applause. I
Can't eat it.
survive off of,
Can't eat it.
You can't eat it, No, it's like it's wonderful. It feels good, but that's a fleeting experience. But like I survive because I am making a choice to do work that I think is imperative, to use this life in the most beneficial way possible. Right? That's what I survive off of. That's what gets me out of bed. That's what drives me and directs me through hopelessness and despair and fatigue, or just a deep loss of interest, and everything. No, I always come back to this aspiration to say, okay, yeah, I'm here trying to do good things. And that good thing is primarily helping people to suffer less. Right. And because when I enter into, my transition dying experience, this is the one thing I will celebrate. Because this has been the one thing that's been most important for me. Right.
It's
So
funny. You look so young to me. I don't know how many people you talk to that would say that, right?
I know. I'm, it's, and also at the same time, having written that, I am very recognized and appreciated.
And you make certain gestures to increase that in order to magnetize. It's a magnetizing karma.
Absolutely.
Like, you don't exactly see, Karmapa hiding. Let me find a hat that is really inconspicuous so I can move through the audience without anybody noticing. They're just, the Mahamudra tradition is, there was, Trungpa Rinpoche said to 16th Karmapa, he said, he was wearing a gold Rolex watch with gold face. And Rinpoche was trying to say to him, that's a little nouveau riche here in the West, the gold face. And Karmapa said, maybe I'll get gold shoes too. That was the response. So in that tradition of kind of, really not shying away from boldly presenting the brilliance of it, we're in that lineage. It's so you're do you find that you're making certain choices based on, I need to see if I can get myself out there and
absolutely
recognized and so forth?
Absolutely, because that's part of the work, right? For me, part of the work is, part of my personal aspiration is to be seen by people who need to see me.
Oh, I like that. That's nice. Michael's one of them.
Yeah.
Yeah, Michael just went to your retreat. How did you find out about it, Michael?
I've been following Lama Rod's work for a while, I became, a certified meditation teacher from David at the end of 2019. And then I'm sitting with people as a teacher, having to hold global pandemics, George Floyd's death, was happening in the world. And that's one of the things that drew me to both of you, actually, which is this notion of actually spiritual warriorship, right? Which, our tradition from Trungpa Rinpoche, the Shambhala book, because we're householders, and a lot of the teachings that come to us come from monastics or people who renounced being in the world in this way. So having to hold the complexity of the identities we hold, the inheritances that we have on this land in America, the history of anti-Black racism, and like how to sit with people presenting meditation when all this stuff is coming up, and how to be able to serve them, so those kind of experiences and seeking the truth about them kind of brought me to both of you two. So I forget where that statement started, but
well, it was also we were talking about putting your banner up and your flag in the wind, which I think Lama Rod is saying that is something that I believe what you said is that won't in itself nourish you, but the intention behind it is what nourishes you. Is that fair to say?
Yeah. You can't hide your light under a bushel because that doesn't serve being's liberation. Right? You just can't hide. You can't intentionally be hiding, right? But that doesn't mean that you should be consciously trying to get famous at the same time. Right. But again, contradictions, right? So early in my teaching practice, I was like, oh, I'm going to become a rock star.
You had that thought.
Yeah, I had that thought. And not only did I have the thought, I was telling people that.
Right.
That wasn't a secret. I was like, no, I actually will be famous. And I'm not famous just to be famous. I'm famous because people need to get the work, the dharma, the medicine. I think of my dharma and practice in terms of medicine. This is the medicine that I'm offering. I need to set up a shop. I need to get out there and market to get this medicine out there. Because there are a lot of people who would not be practicing anything, particularly Buddhism, if it wasn't for me being in the world, right? And being a teacher, right? Because my presentation of Dharma is something that feels accessible and relevant and fresh and contemporary for them. So I take that seriously. I take that really seriously, right?
Yeah. Coming from the rock star business myself, and the fact that, in parallel for 50 years, I've been in the entertainment business and in the Dharma world, and crisscrossing those two. It feels to me like many of how people are engaging the process of becoming a teacher, a meditation teacher, and manifesting the world feels very familiar to me from this other realm. Like how you set up your platform, how you make people aware of you, how you market what you're doing, how you brand it, and it's you can be as callous or naive as you want to be about that, but that is what's happening right now in the West. People are really consciously setting up a platform for themselves as a teacher.
Yeah.
How do you keep from taking it too seriously?
That's a really great question, because I can't explain this, but there's a mechanism in my experience, a barrier, a firewall, or something that keeps me from taking this seriously. I just laugh at it often. Right. And I really believe that this is lessons, wisdom that I've cultivated from many past lives. Right. I think that's part of the Boddhisatva work, is that you're learning life after life, how to do this. And you're learning how to be relevant in the time and place. As I talk about in New Saints, the Bodhisattva or the new saint, has to speak the language of the time. You have to look like the people, and that's been a huge part of my teaching. I want to look like you. I want to be able just to move through the world and for you to just have your regular projections. I'm a big Black man walking through the world. Wherever projections you have, I want you to have them, because this is how I am subversive. in the world. And this is how I've gotten into a lot of different spaces that really are quite barred against spiritual teachers, spiritual folks. Like I can walk right into those spaces, not only because, I look like people and seem very contemporary, also because I speak languages. I speak the languages of different spaces, which I've intentionally been doing for most of my life, I think. And that's part of the integration work that I can do. I can bring all these languages together, and create new ways of communicating with people.
Yeah, it's just been a bias of mine since day one in the music part of it, to find super cool, very genuine, authentic people who can cross over into the mainstream. I've had a record of working with that. But as you were talking, for whatever reason, I thought of Marvin Gaye.
Oh, wow.
Right. That, spontaneously, and sexual healing, that, and what he went through at Motown to get to make those statements, and the fact that he blended this kind of very, very unique perspective and brave perspective with a popular culture. I just personally love that combo.
Yeah.
You don't always get there because you'll lean on, when it comes time to put your money down, you put it on one side or the other usually.
Yeah. But you have to have good people around you as well. People who are telling you the truth, right? And so Michael knows Sister Siddhartha. She was my, one of my co-teachers on retreat. And Sister Siddhartha, Sister Siddhartha Jackson. She is a practitioner in many traditions. She's a Black Indigenous woman, and we've been friends for a number of years. And on retreats, she's on my team as well, but on retreat, she teaches, movement work, somatic work. We actually work with Orishas as well in many of my retreats, and she leads that work as well. She's a Dharma practitioner. She's a lineage holder, in indigenous traditions, but I bring her up because she's someone in my life who tells me the truth and keeps me really rooted in indigeneity.
Wow.
And she's not the only one. I intentionally invite people to be around me who are able to reflect back to me and to say, okay, Rod, what are you doing? Why are you making this decision? Why do you want to be in this magazine? Why do you want to hang out, with this person? They're always giving me that feedback, right?
This is a very, very big deal, this topic.
Huge.
Yeah.
I mean, the Buddha taught this. This is the first Dharma teaching that hit me really hard, was when the Buddha said, surround yourself with good people. Right? Surround yourself with people who are on the same page with you, or else you get distracted.
And he let them teach a lot of the, like the Heart Sutra, he didn't hardly say a word until the end, So are these people conducting classes as part of your retreats then, is what you're saying?
Yeah, people, these folks are doing retreats. They're helping me to be out in the world in various ways, right? But there's so many people, as from the music industry, and I know personally from just from celebrities that I'm beginning to develop relationships with, there's just people can be surrounded by people who really are trying to manipulate them, to use them for their own benefit. But that's the business too. You have a publicist, you have all these people who are their income is based on you. So the better you do, the better they do. But that doesn't mean they have your best intentions at mind, So it's the same with me. Yeah, yes, I am able to really financially compensate, people now who support me. Yes, and their livelihood depends on my work, right? But at the same time, we hold this ethic. I have turned down many things, where the money's really good, but it's not in line with the Dharma. It's not in line with my personal ethic, right? And I've had to say no.
Yeah.
Yeah,
saying no is so powerful a word sometimes. Yeah. And defines, I had a friend who who was a composer, and he said his career was defined not by what he said yes to, but by what he said no to. So let's you cool with jumping back into this a little bit, because
absolutely,
it's really rich stuff. And let me just go on to the next one. So that was much of our labor will be unseen. So that's an interesting how we got into like some of it will be seen, and that was what we understood. That we will be misunderstood.
Yeah.
I wonder. I wonder how many great saints would be sitting in their cave right now, going, "Oh yeah, baby, that's for sure." When we choose to get free and vow to help others to get free, we are embracing a life that sets us apart from most beings. To choose freedom is to choose clarity, love, compassion, and joy. Their manifestation as awakened care will influence us to make decisions that other people who have not made the same vows will not understand. When I made the decision to enter a long retreat, the 3-year retreat you're talking about there, in order to embody my commitment to this path, I was misunderstood by a lot of people in my family, especially close friends and family. My activist friends accused me of running away from the real work of freedom. One family member accused me of being selfish. Another told me I was joining a cult. Someone even accused me of having a mental illness. Most people felt like I was making an extreme decision that made no sense. None of this bothered me because I was sure that this is what I needed to do to get free. And it was. People who are not trying to get free will not understand what the work looks like and will try to disrupt that work because they'll think you're making a mistake. Your work may remind them of work that they're not doing, and that may be painful for them. They may attempt to sabotage you. As my elders say, keep your mind stayed on freedom and trust your choices and instincts. So that's pretty juicy.
Yeah.
Anything to add to that?
Yeah. Well, I mean, just basically, it's a lot to hold. Like when you get really sure about a choice, and then a lot of folks in your life, folks who love you, right, who've known you for a very long time, are just saying, you know what, you're making a really bad choice, right? And that's another dilemma that we find ourselves in on the path, right? But what really shored up, or was a really important foundation for me, was actually being in a relationship with people who had made the same choices. And I looked at them and said, oh, like, how did you become like this? Because that's where I need to be. And what did you do? And for me, Lama Willa Baker was that early example for me. And I went to see her teach, like her first teaching when she moved to Boston, in the early 2000s. And I just looked at her and said, what are you? And how did you get this way? Because I intuitively felt that was where I needed to be, and I was sold.
Did she do the 3-year retreat?
Oh yeah, she did 2 3-year retreats.
Yeah.
If
you do 2, do you get like 3 months off or anything like that?
3 months off. You can, if you do 2 3-year retreats, then you can do whatever you want.
Like a discount,
Yeah, I think you do. Yeah. I mean, there are ways. Yeah, there are deals that you can make. Because it's like once you do your second one, you're actually having to support the retreat.
Right.
You're not just a practitioner, so you do get a little bit.
Where did you do yours?
At Kagyu Tupting Sholing, which is now Palpong, Tupting Sholing, in New York, and Wappinger Falls, which Poughkeepsie, on the Hudson.
They have a beautiful shrine room there.
Oh yeah. And Norla Rinpoche was our teacher back then, and he's passed away now, transitioned. But yeah, I mean, people were throwing all kinds of stuff at me to get me, and it was hard. Like people, one elder member of my family just really broke down crying that she was so afraid for me that I was like joining a cult. And quite honestly, it was a cult. right? And the optics weren't great. I was shaving my head, wearing a maroon dress. I couldn't have visitors, couldn't talk to people. I was in silence. Yeah, like it was hard to deny the cult allegations, right? But then, afterwards, we really did realize that we were, practicing within a cult culture that ended up with a lot of harm and violence happening to people. So, so people were right, but even so, I knew that I had to do that. Even all the feedback that I was getting, I was like, I'm absolutely sure this is a hard choice for a lot of folks. Like when you hit a dilemma like this, where you're actually going against so many people, but you have to rely and trust on your intuition, on the data that you have about this path. Right. This gets into the space of religious psychosis as well. Like this is tricky, challenging, complex territory.
Yeah, and it's the deep end of the pool. We're not talking about just for everybody who's out there just going and taking a mindfulness course or a weekend workshop. This is really you're surrendering at a level that most people won't be asked to do in their lifetime.
Exactly, and in a way that will scare people.
And they're worried for you. They're worried for your sanity. Yeah. What was that song, Vincent Van Gogh? About Vincent. How they worried for your sanity.
Oh,
right? What was that?
Vincent. I know exactly what you're talking about.
Yeah.
But and then you hold that, and I just said, you know what? I can't do anything about this. So I'm just going to go into retreat, and I'll see what happens after 3 years, and then we'll just begin again.
Beautiful.
And we began again. Like no one really doubted me. No one, everyone started living. You know what the most amazing thing about 3-year retreat is that people continue to live their lives.
You mean the other people?
Other people outside of retreat, your family, your friends, they live their lives. They're dealing with life. They're not sitting around thinking about you anymore. And that was apparent. Because people weren't writing, it was but and then you come out and people in my circle of my friends and family were like, oh, 3 years just kind of went by, didn't it?
Wow.
And then I was able to be out in the world and to show people what happened to me. People saw that I was different.
Wow.
And then part of my aspiration since then, particularly with my family, was to continue to show up as much as possible to show people why I did it.
Were your parents still around?
Oh, yeah.
Are they still around now?
Oh, yeah. And so they're not together, but my mother and father on separate trips came to the monastery before I went in to investigate. So there was some due diligence with all this. So my family didn't just let me do this. They were just like, well, I will come and meet all these people. And they met my, teacher. They met the community. They got a sense of where I was going to be at for 3 years. And that really was very helpful. They were still anxious, but at least they knew where I was. Right.
They touched in.
They touched in. And, I think at this point, I think so many people were grateful that I was just safe somewhere for 3 years.
Isn't that beautiful in a way?
Yeah.
It boils down to love and affection and I wish everybody could grab a hold of that last thing you just said. We're far from the rudiments,
Yeah.
We're far from the basics right now.
Yeah. My mother was just like, at least I knew you were safe for 3 years. Not so much now. Since I'm all over the world now. But I just found that to be the sweetest reflection. Like you were safe, and I was. I was in the safest place that I could be. But you have to. It took a lot of labor to make that choice. I mean, personally, it was easy. I was like, yeah, I'm doing this. But the labor was holding really just the feedback from the people who love you. Like people, this wasn't coming from people who hated me, who disliked me. These are people who loved me, who were super concerned, but it also was important because it kind of proved a point that I will be making really intense decisions for the rest of my life. And I know how to manage that. And my mother, when she came to visit the monastery before I went into retreat, I overheard her saying to someone, and a member of the community at the monastery, she said that, like, my son has never made a bad choice.
Whoa.
And I don't, and she was like, my son has never made a bad choice, and I don't think he's starting now. She said that exact thing. And I was like, whoa, like that really, and I don't think she knew I was listening, but she was having a private conversation that I was in earshot of. And like, that was like, I'd never heard my mom say that she felt like that I was making really good decisions. And for the most part, I do make really good decisions. So like, I've never made a bad, really harmful, intense decision that's had intense consequences. I've been very thorough, and discerning in big decisions that I've made in my life, right? I just don't make just these quick decisions. I sit with things for a very long time before I make a decision. So when she reflected that, I was like, okay. And that gave me confidence as well.
Well, it's such a loving thing to say.
Yeah.
That's it's very moving. If you're in the Olympics of Bodhisattvahood, and you go like I'll give you an example. Like as a guitarist, I saw Julian Lage play, who's a young, brilliant, talented guitar player. I went like, I'm going to throw my guitars away, throw them in the river. He's 30, 40 years younger and has been, practicing 15 hours a day since he was 8 years old. And it's just like, you go, okay, that's it. So now you're looking around the world for a bodhisattva to model your own aspiration on. Yeah. Is there anybody living that comes to mind?
Oh, an excellent question. I actually, I'm looking to the right of me because I have a wall of pictures from, that I keep up from people who I consider bodhisattvas, like, and people that inspired me to write the new things. So I'm just kind of looking through this list, and honestly, many of them have transitioned.
Yeah.
On, I
so
think.
Can I throw a couple at you then, or do you have somebody?
Yeah.
Garchen Rinpoche.
I've never sat with Garchen Rinpoche before, but I know people who have as well.
It just seems like, okay, now you're getting serious about these vows and what it takes to accomplish them. That there's literally the self-cherishing has been dialed down to as close to zero as one could perceive. But okay, he's not. So who did you have somebody in mind?
Well, I have I have many teachers, from traditions.
But alive now.
Alive now. Yeah. Yeah. A lot of teachers that are alive now that I'm sitting with and studying with. But alive now, I would say, there are so many really amazing activists that are doing, spiritual activists that are doing incredible work that I follow online. Of course, Reverend Angel is one of those people that will always inspire me, in this work. And she was one of the first, people who came along and was like, listen, I'm going to help you actually get known. And I revered and still revere Reverend Angel as someone who's really open this path up for so many of us who are just deeply concerned with justice and also really deeply engaged in practice, But when we started working together, of course, our collaboration produced Radical Dharma along with our friend Yasmin. She was like, you're a Black Lama, a Black Dharma teacher, but particularly a Black Lama. We've never seen one of you.
It sounds super cool, though, doesn't it? Yeah. Black Lama. I want you to meet the Black Lama. I'm there the next.
And there are Black Lamas. There have been Black Lamas. I'm not the first.
Right.
But particularly, she said that, like, I want you to be known.
Mm-hmm.
Right. And so her mentoring, her teaching really helped me to accept, and embrace being known in the world. Right. Because she was like, people need to see you.
Mm-hmm.
Right. And I really began to understand that over the years, that there are so many people that are suppressed particularly within our school and lineage, and it was really due to the kindness, not only of people like Reverend Angel, but also the insight tradition that was really helpful.
Yeah.
They were like, you're a Black Lama, you're not in our tradition, but we like you. And you offer something. Come and teach at Spirit Rock. Come and teach at like this Insight Center. I still go to London Insights every year when I'm in London in the UK. Like these Insight Centers early on were just like, we want to acknowledge you and celebrate you and invite you. And that helped me to learn much more, about the Insight tradition and early Buddhism. Right. That helped me to understand mindfulness, even more. I'm just grateful for the tradition for taking a chance, because insight can be very closed, but every tradition can.
Sure.
The Zen centers that invited me, who helped me to be known, right? Who shared platforms, teachers who were just like, come and teach with me, across traditions. Like that's been important for me. I wouldn't necessarily be sitting here with you if I felt secluded within the tradition, within the Kagyu tradition. I don't think that would be the case. I think, I wouldn't have learned how to really be, I would say, not appropriate, but like accessible. For people if it wasn't for having to teach in other traditions.
Gotcha. Michael, anything?
I'm just so stoked to be here. I listen to him talk all the time, So
I know, but you're so smart. You think of
I mean, there's so many things. Like a lot bubbled up, I think. When you were talking about your monastic experience, Lama Rod, which you've written about very generously, and these are very challenging things when teachers cause harm and stuff. And we're collectively learning how to navigate that. And I appreciate you modeling that behavior. And some of the teachings on the Boddhisatva that like really landed on me were like, it's messy. Like you're not going to make it out clean. And like we have this, like there's this part of us, this desire to like have it be neat and to present and like look together, in all these ways. And that like even taking a monastic path where there's the Vinaya, and for our listeners, if you don't know what the Vinaya is, that is like the codes of conduct for monastics. It was even within the monastic community, it was messy.
Absolutely. Yeah, that's where the Vinaya comes from. Someone made a mistake and the Buddha was like, okay, we can't do that now. And it was just like one series of mistakes after the other, right? But like to say, I think, Michael, you bring up something really important, which is authenticity. And people have to figure out who they are. And like, this is who I am. I'm a, householder, layperson, teacher. But if you really come alive as a renunciate, as a monastic, that's what you do. That's not, monasticism isn't my most authentic expression, right? And that was made evident by my teacher, who was just like, you actually need to be in the world, like being yourself. Like my teacher, is extremely controversial, absolutely. Like he created a lot of harm. And I have been very upfront about that. And at the same time, I've also been very upfront about the ways in which he supported me, saying things that Tibetan teachers of that generation you wouldn't think would have the capacity to say, but he would just look at me and say, "You're Black." Like there are people who will listen to you before they listen to me. And you need to take that seriously. He would just look at me like in my authorization meeting after retreat, where, the teachers usually tell you, okay, this is what's happening next. He was just like, you need to be seen, right? Because there are people who will take you much more seriously than me, and you need to take that seriously. That's important for you. That was one of the most important pieces of advice, personal advice and teachings that my teacher gave me, to be yourself and to use that to help benefit people. Right. So I can take that medicine, I can take that wisdom, and that's at the same time be very aware of the harm that he created for others. And that's the complexity again. It comes back to this fundamental paradox, which I think is exemplified in the Heart Sutra. It can be everything at once. One person can embody a whole bunch of different experiences. And the practice is asking us to show up to hold space for all of that together.
So while we're in that thread, this one jumped out, for those listening, we won't have time to go through all of this, but just reiterating that we've been talking quite a bit about Lama Rod's book, New Saints, and you should get a hold of the book, and then you can take a deep dive. And I think you'd be well advised to, because the density of kind of presentation in this book means you have to go slowly through it. It's not one of those things like, it's not I read that in two hours. That you would be missing a lot if you did that, don't you think?
Oh, absolutely. It's not a 3-point step towards enlightenment.
Right. And here's the one that jumped out, and I think might require a little bit of further elaboration, would be, we will always embody the potential for violence. I'm sure you've gotten some feedback on this. The new saint is committed to the reduction of violence. Okay. It is not possible to completely disrupt the harm that we can create for beings. Even the Buddha was said to have stepped on a few insects in his lifetime. If we love someone, we'll always have the potential to express violence. That's a very powerful statement. For example, if you're a parent and someone comes along and tries to hurt your child, you will probably not just let your child be hurt without protecting them and fighting off the aggressor. We must consider how some forms of violence can sometimes only be disrupted by other forms of violence. Let me read that again. We must consider how some forms of violence can sometimes only be disrupted by other forms of violence. Sometimes I've had to raise my voice and cuss people out, which is a very gentle way of saying that, but because that is the only thing that can reduce the harm that I or others around me are experiencing from an aggressor. There have been times that I've had to physically protect myself from the harm of others because I care for my well-being as much as other people's well-being. The new saint chooses violence only because they care for themselves and others and know that to protect people, including aggressors, we sometimes have to meet violence with violence. In other words, the new saint can choose violence out of deep care for everyone, including an aggressor, while being clear that violence isn't meant as retaliation. It's meant to reduce harm. That's any thoughts come up like to follow up that?
Yeah. Well, when I've chosen violence in the past, particularly in my adulthood, it's not because I've wanted someone to hurt. Even if I was attacked, like if I was physically attacked, like I'm not defending myself because I want you to hurt as much as I am. I am trying to disrupt what's happening in the moment and knowing that like I have a right to be safe as well. And I think this is what we have to unpack around violence. I think we get into these Buddhist spaces and we're like, okay, we're nonviolent now. And I think Dr. King is one of these prime examples that folks like to uplift as this embodiment of nonviolence. But Dr. King was a master of violence. his strategy in the civil rights movement was to record the violence against Black people and to make that violence visible in the media.
But why is that, Lama Rod? Why is that violent? That seems like kind of skillful, but I don't see why that's violent.
Well, because the alternative could be like, well, let's not put ourselves in harm's way.
So he's willing to experience violence, but not generate it.
Yeah. But that's still engaging, because there were people who were getting into the cycle of protecting themselves as well. Like people were, there were pushbacks. I think about Gloria Richardson. Someone that I talk about, the civil rights movement organizer I talk about in New Saints, who looked at a gun and was like, "Nope." You don't get to wave that at me. That's aggressive. Right.
But that's kind of Aikido-like, you know what I mean? That's not like I'm going to take that gun and you'll see what it feels like to be at the other end of it.
Yeah, but you don't have to have that intention for violence to happen. I mean, I don't have to have the intention of saying, you know what, I'm going to take this and hurt you as much as you've hurt me. But I may be trying to defend myself and still end up hurting you.
But you could have that feeling, no? Couldn't that feeling arise of like wanting to switch the tables to
absolutely.
To manifest some kind of like, intense energy of wrath, rage back toward you. You wrote Love and Rage, right? So what about rage? What about it? Do you experience it? Do you feel like at a certain point you don't experience it anymore?
Oh, no. I experience anger, rage, everything. I experience everything.
Yeah.
But it's not the thing itself. It's my relationship to the thing now. It's like I feel anger and frustration, pettiness all the time. Absolutely. Right. But like I know how to offer those experiences space now. I don't have to just react to anything. Right. But this is the higher level teaching here when we're talking about violence. Like this is a higher understanding of violence here. When I talk about the new saint has the capacity for violence, I think sometimes you have to get very active in getting free. And sometimes it means you have to move people out of the way to get free.
Yeah.
I think often of Harriet Tubman, who, we always think about her rifle. And she says she never shot it, she never used it, but it was a reminder for people, that if someone tried to turn back, then they would all be at risk.
Yeah.
And so forth. I think there are many examples like this, the Buddha in past lives having to choose violence, actual murder. I talk about Miller Rapa, who actually, killed 39 people. Yeah. As an act of retaliation against his family for being disinherited. Right.
Theoretically, that was before he became a bodhisattva, though, right?
Right, but that led to his bodhisattvahood, right? The deep regrets led him to the path, But I think that like there's a lot of invisible harm and violence that happens, particularly in our communities, that gets erased, right? Because we don't want to put that label of violence, even though it does create harm for people, right? Yeah. And because we don't want to be labeled violent. And I think for me, it's been important for me to say, I have the capacity for a lot of violence, actually. Right. And I think that's what makes us human. That's part of humanity. Right. Like I think Maya Angelou had a quote. Actually, someone just shared this with me, so I'm not terribly clear, but just to paraphrase the sentiment of this Maya Angelou quote was that like, if you can't understand like the harm that people can do to one another, then you haven't actually experienced full humanity.
That's right.
That's true. She was just saying, and for me, she was just saying, like we all have these thoughts. And at some point you have to name it, and actually, particularly in a Buddhist sense, you have to learn how to hold space for those thoughts. Like you don't have to react to them. So I have all kinds of thoughts, but I don't react to them. But if someone rolls up on me wanting to harm me, then I will protect myself. I don't go around enacting violence on people because I want to or whatever. This is defensive for me, right? And with this is interdependence. Of course, we are all moving through the world creating harm for people, and we're not even conscious of it. Beings, not just people, beings. Like, we're stepping on insects all the time. We have conscious beings in our bodies, that make up like our digestive system and so forth, right? We're impacting beings all the time. So we just acknowledge that. And this is why we're trying to get out of this. Like this kind of chaos, right? I have to transcend all this delusion in order to get back to a state where I'm free, right? From harm or from victimhood and being a perpetrator. But until that happens, this is the situation. Yeah. I will always be harmed by others. I will always be harming others in ways that I'm conscious of or not conscious of. That's just how it goes.
Yeah.
But to reduce the violence, I'm situating myself within a deep ethic of love. Like, I want all beings to be free, and I know that there are times where I do get in the way of beings getting free. Absolutely. I hope to make that as unintentional as possible, but also to bring lots of awareness to reducing the ways in which I am a problem or I'm an obstacle, right? And there are people who look at me and they hear something that I say and they turn them off to Dharma. They're like, oh, this is what Buddhism is. They may pick up new saints and go, this is Buddhism. I may create blocks for people. But that's not my intention. So intention is the key here.
Yeah. Well, there's so much to unpack, and time. I want to respect your time, and thank you so much for sharing your journey with us. And I think it was great to have Michael, sitting in, and he's really my idea of a good student in the sense of like really curious and alive and honest and
fantastic,
forthcoming. So to all of those out there who are not familiar with your work, I'm going to really strongly recommend you pick up a copy of New Saints and check it out. Is there anything coming up that you would want to let people know about where they could meet you in person? Any trainings or workshops?
Yeah, and I would just say, just check my website. Depending on when this episode comes out.
Okay.
Just always check my website. Anyone can sign up for my newsletter, and and that's really up to date information we send out a couple times a month.
Beautiful. Wishing you a lot of fruition and happiness on your journey, because you're providing such a portal for people. I think that emerges in my mind as sure, somebody else could say not my cup of tea or something like that, but I think there's a whole gang of folks that are going, okay, I can relate to this.
Yeah.
And that's cool.
And I would just say, as we wrap up, it's just to that, like, I think so much of this is figuring out who you're speaking to. As a teacher, I have had to learn who I'm talking to, and not so much get lost in the people who aren't paying attention.
Yeah. And who are just, the word kibbutz, you know what that means?
I don't think so. Kibbutz.
It's a Yiddish word, but it just means they're just like, look at that. They didn't, they're just complaining basically and not really participating.
Exactly.
So, and they want the mic big time. They want the mic, and they got it now on social media. They've got a big mic. So,
I get that.
Well, take good care of yourself.
Thank you.
We'll see you again soon, and thank you for coming on the podcast.
Yeah, it was a pleasure. Thank you.
There you have it, folks. Episode number 54 of the CSM podcast featuring Lama Rod Owens. Again, we'd like to send deep appreciation to Lama Rod for taking the time to join us and share his work and wisdom with us. We encourage everyone to head over to lamarod.com to connect with him and pick up a copy of The New Saints. We sincerely hope that you've enjoyed listening to this podcast as much as we've enjoyed making it, and that the conversations herein help you in your life. And we'd like to thank you all for listening. If you appreciate this podcast, please give it a like, subscribe, positive review, share it with your friends. It really helps us spread the word and continue producing it. Also, if you're interested in cultivating a mindfulness practice or going deeper in one that you already have, please head over to dharmamoon.com to engage in our programming and connect with us in community. And lastly, but not leastly, head over to BeHereNowNetwork.com, where you may already be, to listen to more podcasts. And along with all those things, I'd like to encourage you to turn all your devices off, put all the websites and podcasts down, and spend some quiet time with yourself that's generative and caring, so you can nurture the garden within you, and so that you can share your own goodness, wisdom, and compassion with a world that sorely needs it. Okay, that's it for this episode. Thank you again. May you be safe, healthy, happy, and at ease. Much love.